Well, let me get started. Hello out there in Zoom land. Welcome to our redistricting webinar. My name is Arv Larson. I'm a 21-year resident of San Diego County's District 4, where my wife and I live in the San Diego City neighborhood known as Pacific Beach. I am one of the appointed commissioners on the San Diego County's Independent Redistricting Commission, which in shorthand we call the IRC. Today's session will attempt to tell you what the IRC is, what we do, and why we do it. I will be joined in today's presentation by two of my fellow commissioners who also live in District 4. They are Commissioner Sonia Diaz and Commissioner Barbara Hansen. I will introduce them in a moment. I have been asked to serve as the moderator and facilitator for today's session, which we call an educational tour of why redistricting matters in San Diego County. It is being presented as a virtual Zoom webinar. But first, a few housekeeping details. If you have any questions during this educational session, you are welcome to submit a question using the Zoom question and answer function anytime during the meeting. Find the Q&A button on the bottom center of the main Zoom window. Your questions will be answered during the Q&A portion of the meeting. We will be using closed captioning during the meeting. If you find them distracting or would prefer not to see them, you can adjust your settings by clicking the CC Live Transcript button at the bottom of the middle of the main Zoom window and select Hide Subtitles. I will give everyone a few moments to make a few adjustments while we're getting started. Okay, I would like to mention that we are recording today's meeting and it will be available for viewing on our IRC website. Our slides are also available on our website. Today's session is the second of 5 planned educational sessions, one for each district. This one has been designated for District 4, but because all of our meetings are virtual, all are welcome to attend any session. We are happy to have you here, no matter where you live in the county. Live language interpretation for these meetings is available if requested 24 hours in advance of the meeting. If you would like to request live translation, you can call us or email our redistricting inbox, and that contact information will be provided during today's presentation. So let us begin. First, I'd like to introduce Commissioner Sonia Diaz, who lives in the City Heights district of San Diego City. She is a program manager with the local nonprofit Kitchens for Good. Sonia grew up most of her life in southeastern San Diego, has over a decade of experience in virtual roles, various roles, working for both international and local nonprofits in the area of fundraising and grant writing, policy advocacy, nonprofit development, volunteer recruitment, and project management. Sonia enjoys traveling and the outdoors and is an avid ultra runner and hiker. Next, I'd like to introduce Commissioner Barbara Hansen, who lives in the Claremont Mesa district of San Diego City. She is originally from Westwood and Pasadena in the Los Angeles County area. She is a retired educator and a nonprofit manager working with at-risk populations in San Diego County. Since relocating to San Diego nearly 25 years ago, she has worked as a teacher, a grant writer, contract manager, and volunteer leader. She enjoys working, listening, participating, encouraging, supporting, and demonstrating passion for learning in all that she does. I would like to thank my fellow commissioners for their time today and for their service alongside me on the San Diego County Independent Redistricting Commission. So without further delay, I'll now turn it over to our first speaker of today, Commissioner Diaz.
Thank you, Commissioner Larson. On behalf of my colleagues, Commissioners Hansen and Larson, I would like to welcome you to this educational forum on redistricting in San Diego County. Here's the agenda for today's presentation, just to kind of orient ourselves. First, we're going to be covering what is redistricting. Second, who and what is the Independent Redistricting Commission and what do we do? Third, I'll tell you a little about why redistricting matters and why it's important. And then finally, we'll tell you how you can participate, because as you'll find out, your participation is really important to us. Next slide. So this is just a little reminder. This is an educational event and not a public hearing, so therefore we're unable to take any public input today on map drawing and on district boundaries. So we do want your input on those issues, but you can provide that at a later date, which we will discuss in this presentation. So before we get started, I want to kind of get a sense of what our audience members know about redistricting. And we'll start with a little virtual poll. And so basically on a scale from 0 to 4, how much do you think you know about redistricting? 0 being you know very little to nothing, and 4 being you're an expert at this. So I'll give you a few minutes to respond as the answers come in real time, and we'll take a look. Barbara, I think there might be some. No, we're still waiting on some answers coming in.
Correct, Commissioner.
Okay.
It'll be just a second.
Sure. Okay. There we go. So we have the majority of our answers fell within 3 range, which actually indicates mixed results. It seems that we have a fairly mixed group today, with some answering they're very familiar, some not so familiar. So I hope this presentation will help answer some of your lingering questions that you might have. And again, as Commissioner Larson mentioned, when you do have questions that come to mind, please enter them in the chat as they come in. So we're going to do another poll. How important do you think redistricting is, with 0 being not important at all or 4 being extremely important? I give you a few minutes to respond to this question. Wow. So as I guessed, most of you believe this is a really important issue, with the majority voting for, indicating that it's very important to you. And so we'll talk more about redistricting process later in this presentation and share with you in greater detail why redistricting is so vital to our process. Okay, so next slide, please. So for those of you who don't know what redistricting is, we're going to do a brief overview. Redistricting is the process of redrawing district boundaries for each of our political districts so that each has equivalent population. We redraw our new boundaries every 10 years based on the federal census. So if you filled out the census, kudos to you. That's the first step in the redistricting process. As counting everyone is important because our Constitution sets population as the basis for sharing political power. So everything from our city council members, congressional representatives, state and local elected officials, each jurisdiction has its own redistricting process. But today, of course, we're focusing exclusively on the County of San Diego's. Next slide. So why do we redraw? Why do we draw new boundaries? So a lot happens during these 10 years. So think about how your own neighborhood and community has changed over time. And communities may grow because of births and deaths. People move out to different parts of the county. And with those changes, those dynamic changes that happen over time, also the number of people, so areas where there once roughly the same number of people become unequal. And also with that changes communities' priorities, interests, and goals. Next slide. Okay. So this will just kind of illustrate how those changes that I just mentioned before affect how a community is divided among its districts. So now you'll see on the slide illustration of this idea. On the left, you'll see a community with a population equally divided among its districts. On the center image, you'll see how population can change over time as experience the kind of shifts that I just described. And the third, on the bottom right, is the image of how redrawing these boundaries in this process we call redistricting ensures that now the populations are equal in each district. So we redraw boundaries every 10 years in this process called redistricting, so it will allow for fair political representation. So we've explained what it is. Now you might be wondering who gets to draw these new district boundaries. So enter the Independent Redistricting Commission, abbreviated as the IRC. We are 14 citizen volunteers who were, we all had to apply, go through a very rigorous application process. We were selected from an initial pool of nearly 300 applicants. And that initial pool, the 60 most qualified applicants were then selected. Some of the minimum qualifications included that we had to have been a resident of San Diego County, voted in at least one of the last 3 statewide elections, demonstrated no conflict of interest. In other words, within the last 10 years preceding the application that we submitted, we or a family member did not run for public office or work for an elected official or have been a registered lobbyist. Commissioners cannot run for public office in any capacity, local, federal, state, until 5 years after we finish our term. Some of the criteria in the application that was looked at was how well we had were able to possess the following skills. So the analytical skills was very important. And in addition to the ability to understand and apply state and federal laws, the ability to be impartial, knowledge of and appreciation for the district, the diversity of the county. And we there was also other criteria considered, such as party affiliation, because the commission is required to reflect the political party breakdown of the county. And we'll touch on a little bit more of that later. And also, more importantly, be representative of the county's diversity, so that the commissioners also had to consider other factors such as gender, ethnicity, race, and geography. And so, by the way, also I forgot to mention that the first 8 commissioners were selected at random at a meeting, and then those 8 commissioners selected the remaining commissioners. And so you go to the next slide. So we represent a broad and diverse county of San Diego, 7 women and 7 men, evenly distributed from the 5 districts. And on the next slide, you'll see that in terms of party affiliation, we closely mirror the county breakdown of 6 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 4 no party preference. We also bring a variety of professional, personal experiences that bring a lot of value to the commission. And I'm excited to be part of this worthy project, just because, I am I have a full-time job on the side, but I am very committed to my community and I have that passion. So a lot of us don't get paid. We're completely volunteers. We don't get paid for this work that we're doing. Next, okay. So San Diego County is really unique in that we've been a leader in redistricting reform for quite some time. And this was the result of decades of communities coming together to pass Proposition 11, first at the statewide level, called the Voters First Act. It was passed by voters in 2008 that put the power of redistricting in the hands of the citizens, not politicians. So subsequent legislation, thanks to Assemblymember Weber, AB 801 created the San Diego County Independent Redistricting Commission. And now we are formed today in 2020. And before this was all created, the Board of Supervisors and its appointed advisory committee were responsible for adopting their own electoral maps. So we've come quite a long way in this process. And unfortunately, in many parts of the country and in many parts of the state, this doesn't exist. Independent commissions don't exist. And this all too often results in maps that serve political interests and keep incumbents in power rather than serve the public good. So you may have heard the term gerrymandering, and it dates as far back as 1800s. And basically, it was a term developed at that time because it described this Massachusetts politician by the name of Elbridge Gerry. And he thought he was very clever to hold on to his power by drawing an oddly shaped district that circumvented various communities. And as a result, it shaped very much like a salamander. And so the term gerrymander comes from gerry and salamander together. So you'll often hear this term come up during redistricting issues. And this is exactly the reason why reform is that we want to prevent that from happening. So we operate, I just want to emphasize that we operate as an independent commission, which means we are volunteers that are independent from the influence of elected officials. And we are responsible for conducting the redistricting process in an open, transparent manner. And we're committed to making it as possible for many broad and diverse voices to be heard. So some of our duties is we meet twice every month. And we're required by law to hold meetings with at least one in each district to gather public testimony to learn more about the communities. And we use this public testimony and input to draw draft maps with our independent demographer. And after we've gone through a public process, we will adopt the final map that will be used for the supervisor elections for the next decade. All of our public hearings must comply with the Brown Act and be noticed and posted in advance to ensure the fullest public participation. So we are accountable only to you, the public, in our duties to draw fair and accurate maps for the county. So here's some of the criteria that we use to draw new boundaries. And they're listed in order of priority. So districts must be of nearly equal population as required by the Constitution. And we expect, based on the population of San Diego County, we expect each district to have roughly 650 people. Next, we must make sure that we create a map that complies with the Voting Rights Act to ensure that minorities have a fair opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. Districts must be drawn contiguously, so that, meaning that all parts of the district are connected to each other. Districts cannot cut through existing cities, counties, neighborhoods, and communities of interest to the extent possible. And districts should be geographically compact so that nearby areas of population are not bypassed for more distant populations. In addition, we cannot consider the place of residence of any elected official, incumbent, political candidate in the map drawing process. So these two maps you see on the side in the slide, 2001 and 2011. These were created before redistricting reforms were passed. You can see very substantial changes in the boundaries. You might ask yourself, why are the districts shaped that way? How does my community relate to other communities included in that district? These are important questions to keep in mind for the redistricting process, and we'll cover a little more about that later in the presentation. Next slide. So San Diego County is unique. It's huge. In that, it's one of the most geographically diverse and expansive districts. And certain additional criteria apply in this regard. So there are 18 incorporated cities, mostly in the western part of the county. As you can see on the map, it's represented in different color blotches. But much of the county is unincorporated territory, represented by the shaded yellow, land outside the boundaries of the 18 incorporated cities I just mentioned. For these reasons, 3 of the 5 districts have to include unincorporated areas. 2 of these districts have to be comprised primarily of unincorporated areas. Next slide. So this is just a larger map, just to kind of put everything into perspective of where our supervisorial districts are currently as of the 2011 map that we are going to be tasked with looking at these boundaries and redrawing them. Next slide. And here's a current map of District 4. It's about 100 square miles within, and includes the city of San Diego, as celebrated as one of the most ethnically diverse districts in the county. And the boundaries extend as far north from UC San Diego, west Pacific Ocean, and includes parts of Southeast San Diego, down south to Paradise Hills. Your current elected supervisor is Nathan Fletcher. Supervisors can now only serve 2 terms of 4 years. And currently there's roughly 640,000 people residing in the district. So I will turn it now over to Commissioner Hansen.
Thanks, Commissioner Diaz. My name is Barbara Hansen, and as was said earlier, I live in the Claremont Mesa part of District 4, and I'm happy to represent our district in this important matter. So why does it matter? That's the big question tonight. Redistricting matters because how maps are drawn and how communities and neighborhoods get grouped together or don't get grouped together and get separated can affect whose voices are heard on election day. Redistricting, when done properly and fairly, ensures that communities can elect a representative of their choice. Remember, this all has to do with electing a person. And as Commissioner Diaz just said, in our case now, it is Nathan Fletcher. For many of you may remember Ron Roberts, who had this position for many, many years, actually decades. So when we're thinking about the redistricting for the county, it's to fill that position, which then goes to the Board of Supervisors to make decisions. So why does it matter? For one reason is because the county works with a budget of over $6.5 billion. Yes, billion. This is money that's collected from each of us in terms of property taxes and other kinds of levies that are made on the people who live here. The county is responsible for providing, among other things, public health, like services around COVID-19 response, including the distribution of vaccines, election services, voter registration, some roads and parks, libraries, law enforcement like the Sheriff's Department, social services like CalFresh and Medicare, jails, public safety. It's a really long list. You may recall recently when all of the COVID vaccines were being made available to county citizens, it was your board of supervisors that worked out where you had to go, how you could get there, who got to go first, and after a time started moving out into local communities so that the people didn't have to travel so far to reach those vaccination services. Whether you lived in an unincorporated city or an incorporated one that's part, or excuse me, an incorporated city, which most of us do, the city of San Diego, or an unincorporated area outside of that, I know this can get confusing, and the decisions made by our supervisors about how county budget gets allocated and spent will affect you. They absolutely will. And it's important that you and your community have a fair chance to elect a supervisor who will accurately represent your point of view. Next slide, please. Redistricting also matters because it can affect a community's ability to elect a representative of their choice. And in these two charts, you can see how the idea that that Commissioner Diaz mentioned about gerrymandering can be used. In the upper chart, you see there are 16 people. And those 16 people are going to be divided up into 4 districts of equal size. In that top version, you see that the orange people, who are the minority in the overall district, are divided up. So there's 1, 2, and 3 people each alone in each of the 4 districts. One district doesn't have any orange people. Now that would be one way to divide the people that would meet the first criteria, which is equal numbers. But if you look at the second one, you can see that the people have been distributed differently. In the second one, there are 4 gray people in the top and 4 gray people on the left side and bottom, and 3 gray people in the right side and bottom, and 1 orange. Oops, I'm backwards. Anyway, in the center, there are 3 gray people and 3 orange people and 1 gray. And you can see in that central district, as it should be, there are 3 out of 4, which represents that group's number in the whole entire district, who then have a majority of that minority in that middle district. And that is a way that that group of people has been ensured that they have a chance to elect a minority representative who they feel represents their points of view. Independent redistricting commissions like ours in San Diego County provide a safeguard against gerrymandering and help promote drawing of fair maps while people can have a chance to elect representatives of their own choice. Now we've talked about what redistricting is, who's responsible, what criteria are used in redistricting, but what about the data? How will the IRC know what changes in population have taken place, or so that they can draw new boundaries to reflect those changes that were demonstrated earlier? First, we get US Census data. This data comes from the federal government down to the state level and then is distributed to the various jurisdictions within California. If you think back to when you filled out the census, you told them your age, you probably said where you were born, you told them what kind of work you do. Every time there is a census, every 10 years, that combination of questions kind of changes, but they reflect the issues that affect government decision-making that affects the population. But in addition to that, that's not really enough information. In addition to that, we get information from you. And from that, we learn what are referred to as communities of interest, interests that may not be delineated in the census, but are still very important to the people who live in the county of San Diego. So let's talk a little bit more about those communities of interest. A community of interest, or what is referred to as a COI, even a COI for short, is population that shares common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. Communities of interest are not defined by their relationships with political parties. They're not just defined by their relationships with incumbents, and that term refers to the people that are currently in office. And it doesn't affect their relationship with people that are running for office in the future. A community of interest is one that shares a common social or economic interest. A community of interest might coalesce around a fact that shares in common culture or a common language. But there are many other ways to define a community of interest. An example might be a neighborhood that is adjacent to a shipping port, because that community shares common interests pertaining to having a shipping port as a neighbor. An example of that would be those who are around San Diego Bay, and there are a lot of military and commercial interests that are affected by laws that are designed to affect areas around San Diego Bay. That might be different from people, for instance, who live along the coast of the Pacific Ocean that deal with the Coastal Commission a lot. They might have a different set of interests that would affect and define their community of interest. A critical source of information, maybe the most critical course about communities of information, will necessarily come from the public, from people telling us about their community of interest. The census data will give us some information about neighborhoods and communities, but it won't necessarily tell us about the issues and concerns that bring a community together. We also have to weigh the interests of communities of interest that are near each other but don't share common interests. And those are factors that the commission has to weigh in drawing the final lines. Okay, so how do you know if you belong to a community of interest? And the pictures on this slide give you some ideas of things that might bring people together. Does your neighborhood share certain celebrations or traditions, like street festivals, maybe, or parades? Are there important places in your community where people gather, like parks or community centers? Is there a history of how your community came together? I know, having worked with the refugee community, that a lot of communities have been formed through the resettlement process, and those are very strong voices in the 4th district. Other questions you might ask are you a part of a community that has issues that have not been adequately addressed by your elected representatives? Maybe some things that the county is responsible for that you feel are not being addressed. Has your community come together to advocate for better services, better schools and roads, health centers? Have you worked for more recognition or support of your community, like having holidays recognized maybe, or historical events commemorated? I know the refugee community has a big day around the end of June that commemorates, can't say the name of it, Resettlement Day. That's not it. But anyway, you know what I mean, sorry. There are many kinds of factors or interests that might help identify a community of interest. I want to remind you that today we really can't take that information from you because this is an educational meeting, but we will do that during public hearings that will be held over the summer. This is an educational session for you to learn about redistricting. And there are many ways, and we offer the public many opportunities to tell us about those communities of interest, and we'll provide you with that information coming soon. The word I was looking for was World Refugee Day, sorry. So how do we get input from the public? You can provide oral testimony at a public hearing. And those are the meetings that I was talking to that will be held in the summer. Some of them may be just District 4, but some of them could be countywide meetings. You can provide oral testimony or even written testimony anytime by email or by submitting e-comments via our website. And we're going to put the addresses for those websites up in just a minute. And I'll leave them up long enough for you to write those down if you want. Also remember that you can always seek this information later on our website, which will give you the transcripts from not only these meetings, but also from our regularly bi-monthly meetings. Now, later on, when we actually have the data, you will be able to draw a map yourself using a website that will be provided for you. Or you can draw a map of your neighborhood that just on a piece of paper and submit it that way to the commission, either by mail or if you scan it in and email it in, and we'll see it there. Just be sure to be as detailed as you can. We want to know cross streets. Maybe do you live north or south or of a major highway? Do you live along a river, or are there some physical characteristics that delineate the area where your community interest starts and ends? And that's the more detail you can give us, the better we will be in meeting the needs of your community of interest. Now we're going to look at a tentative timeline that shows how things will proceed from here. We're already in the early part of June, and we're doing this educational tour. We're late in getting started on this timeline, largely because the information on redistricting, and especially the returns from the census data, have been delayed for a variety of reasons. But that doesn't mean that we can't begin to talk to you and hear from you now, even without that data. By mid to late August, we expect the Census Bureau to release raw data, which means just their total tallies based on the questions and answers that they received. That goes to an organization of state staff that have their own databases that they then feed down. In our case, we will get only the data that affects the county-wide population information. The city of San Diego, the city of La Mesa, whatever, they would get their data that would just pertain to them. And then that information is put in a form that we can use. Then shortly after that, in mid-October, we will begin drawing draft maps. And then those maps will be published and will be made available to anybody that wants to see them. And anybody can comment, offer changes and suggestions about how those boundaries might be changed. Luckily, in our county, we have a lot of given boundaries, like the Pacific Ocean can't change, and the border with Mexico doesn't change, and the border with Imperial County doesn't change, and the border with Orange County doesn't change, or Riverside County. It's those interior borders that can change, and that's where we will prevent gerrymandering from going on. Then our current deadline to adopt that map is December 15th. And that's going to be a push for us. And there's still talk about moving that for later into January, but we don't know that yet. And that affects things like setting primaries for elections that the dates are already set. So it's going to be a squeeze for everybody. And we're hoping that December 15th will work out. I'd like to talk a little bit about why it is tentative. You may have heard that the census data has been delayed. In fact, it has been significantly delayed, affected by a lot of things. One is COVID, of course. That affected the collection of the data, and it also affected the ability to analyze the data. Normally it was supposed to come to us by April, and we're still waiting and will be until later in August or early September. The initial delay was from the result in the census data extending the extension of the map deadline to December 15th. but there may be further delays that we don't know. So please stay tuned. Our priority is to ensure that the public has ample opportunity to participate in the redistricting process and to also ensure that we have time we need to gather all the information to draw fair and accurate maps. Now, normally delays are considered undesirable, but in fact, we kind of think it's a bonus. As additional time for us to dig deep and learn as much as we can about the county, its diverse communities, and especially about communities of interest. It's a bonus for the public, as well as it gives community extra time to work together and to advocate for themselves. I want to show you an example of something that happened 10 years ago that may put the importance of public input into perspective. Prior to the last cycle in 2010, Barrio Logan, and some of you may be familiar with that, it's south of us, was split between two county supervisory districts, with a portion assigned to District 1 and a portion to our District 4. Now that meant that every time the community had something to relate that had impact on decisions of the Board of Supervisors, they had to try to get the attention of two different supervisors, which were dealing with two different sets of priorities, two different populations of people, and that just made it much more difficult. So in 2010, when the redistricting was going on, they spoke up and they asked that the lines be drawn so that they would be in one district or the other. I don't really think they cared particularly which one, but they wanted to be together. And so at the end of that redistricting process, the lines were zigged and zagged so that the area of Barrio Logan was put all in District 1. And that made them very happy, and probably might not have happened had they not spoken up at the appropriate time. So if you see on this slide, you will see the addresses that show how you access information and participation in commission business. First of all, you can attend any meeting, and you can attend the regular meetings of the districts, or you can attend even a redistricting meeting that might be designed for another part of the county. And the address for the attending meetings is the redistricting website, www.sandiego spelled out county spelled out .gov/redistricting. If you want to send us an email, you can email us at redistricting@sdcounty.ca.gov. Or if you want to take advantage of some of the educational resources that we have used to learn as much as we can about redistricting, you can go back to that county website, www.sandiegocounty.gov/redistricting, and there you will see many educational resources, trainings that are about things like the census data or mapping softwares, things like that, that you can do and educate yourself on your own. And then lastly, you can subscribe to our redistricting information, again, on the website at www.sandiegocounty.redistricting. And then you will be notified, for instance, of meetings like this. And probably many of you on this call have already taken advantage of that. And that's how you found out about the meeting tonight. And that way you will get notifications. You won't have to keep going back looking at the same web information all the time. I want to tell you that soon we're going to have a tool on our website that will actually let you map different versions of the lines that divide the 5 counties in San Diego County. And you can send us a map of the whole county, or you can send us a map of District 4 if you live here and that's the one you're most concerned about, and that's the one you want to draw attention to. But there will be more information of that coming up, and that you can, how you can do it, and you can get help with that if you're not able to get it on your own. So this concludes our formal presentation today, coming from Commissioner Diaz and myself. And with a couple things we hope you'll take away. Number one, this only happens once every 10 years after each 10 years of a new census. So this is an important time because the decisions that are made here will last until after the 2030 census. Seems like a long way away, but it comes up quick. The other takeaway we hope you have heard here today is that we are committed to drawing fair and accurate maps that indicate that we have heard what you've said. We have many diverse groups that are interested in how the maps are drawn, and there will be some weighing of contradictory ideas, but we really want to please everybody if we possibly can. We cannot do this work without your input. You have ideas and you have knowledge that no one else has. And if we don't hear it from you, we might not hear it at all. So please contact us in one way or another. Again, you can contact us at redistricting@sdcounty.ca.gov. That email will go to the chair of the commission, Commissioner David Bain, and he will assign it to the person who has the best information to answer your questions. You can call and leave a message at 409-3003, or you can visit our website at www.sandiegocounty.gov/redistricting. Thank you so much for your time tonight, and I'm going to turn it back to Commissioner Larson with your questions.
Well, thank you very much, commissioners. You've done a superb job of illustrating the complexities of the entire process. Let me just clarify one thing. On participation, we really need your help. We want you to participate. And of course, we're virtual right now. Things are changing. We expect at some point here, maybe the next month, we will go from a virtual reality into really face-to-face public meetings where you can attend and see us and talk to us in a more organized way than virtually. So just stay tuned for that. We're still virtual now, but the county may change. Okay, let's get into the Q&A portion of the meeting. There are actually only two questions. Well, now there's one more. But of the two questions that were there a moment ago, the first was, how many people applied to become commissioners? And I'll take that one. It was a very arduous process. It was well advertised across the county to many interest groups, and over 300 people sent in applications. And as was pointed out by Commissioner Diaz, this was winnowed down to 60. And then through a random drawing, it was winnowed down further to just 8. And then the 8 picked another 6. So that's where the 14 came from. But it started with 300 interested citizens wanting to become commissioners. Another question we got was, how will the commission provide access to mapping software for community groups? And Commissioner Diaz, perhaps you can answer that. Or Commissioner Hansen?
Yeah, so there is already software available, but not on our website. What we are referring to is the statewide database. We still need to, the census data needs to still get processed through. And once that is available, we can make that software available. Although we are working on this already for our website. And I believe Barbara, I see her on, has the latest, because we can use existing tools out there, but it's not going to provide the most current census data that we're going to be working with. And maybe you can clarify that, Barbara.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Diaz. So this will also be provided, we anticipate it'll be provided with our new contractor, our demographer contractor, which is on our agenda to be discussed on Thursday. Thank you.
Okay, there were just another few questions, and I will answer one of them. How many people were on this particular virtual call? And my Zoom says there's 27 on the call. And another question was, can you email Commissioner Hansen's presentation to us? And the answer is the presentation of all of us is on the website, and you can get it right now. So you can just copy it from our website. We don't have to email it, but if you call us, we'll be happy to email it to you. We have 10 minutes or so left. Let me go into another poll here. That's polling information that we got at the beginning. We'd like to do it again and see how the presentation has helped you. So our poll number 3 is really asking more, have you gained knowledge of the redistricting? And on a scale of 0 to 4, how much do you know about redistricting? 0, not little, not much, and 4 being an expert. So I'll give you a minute to answer. Okay, Barbara. Aha. Well, it looks like we did some good here, and I think the 3 of us are ecstatic to see that many of you are now familiar with redistricting. Hopefully, the presentation has helped you to answer the questions you might have had. But if not, you're welcome to access our website, looking at what we call the training continuum, which we use as commissioners to learn more about redistricting ourselves. But that training continuum is on our website, and you can contact us by email or phone or any way you want. And finally, one more question to be considered. Our 4th question is on a scale of 0 to 4. How important do you now think redistricting is? 0 is not important to at one extreme, and the other is 4 being extremely important. So I'll give you a minute to answer that question. Oh, it's wonderful. Hey, I think we have really been able to tell you how important it really is. All the commissioners really believe that it's quite important. And we're all doing this the first time. It has never been tried before in our county. And we're looking forward to this. And I'm glad you think it's very important that it's being done. With that, let me go back to 2 other questions. We hear that many redistricting efforts are simultaneously going on, and it would seem that would also impact County District 4 residents. How are these other districts or these other redistricting efforts related? Commissioner Diaz?
Sorry, I was on mute. Well, as you are aware, our District 4, as it's currently in its current state, includes the city of San Diego. So that's one of the major jurisdictions that has its own actually independent redistricting commission. And they're going through the same exact process as we are. And our commission is in contact with their commission since there is overlap, but the two processes are separate. And if you're referring to other, like, for example, congressional seats or state and statewide, that's a different process altogether. So none of those processes will affect ours. Ours is completely independent and separate. But there is, as far as, looking at the different communities that are included in our district, how does that, you kind of have to look at how does that impact, how the district will look like, and with the census data coming in late and with the census data that we have so far, we can infer what it would look like, but we really need to ask the public. And this is where your input comes in, and it's super important when you get to start thinking about this early on in the process of what your community looks like and how does that fit into the county. I don't know if I answered completely that question. It's a little complicated when you look at different jurisdictions, but there is, just think of it as the city has its own process and it's a lot smaller, and then the county has its own separate process, but they are both independent.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Diaz. That I think explains it. It's very confusing at the federal level and the Assembly and the Senate within California, and then within the cities that do have districts, and certainly San Diego has 9 districts. We all live in many different districts, but for purposes of today's presentation, it's just the county and our District 4. And the lines will change, no doubt about that. I see I got another question about can we repeat the website address? I'd like you to put up the slide again, showing our contact points, rather than have me read the website address. Barbara, can you flip backwards?
Yes, well, we'll get that slide up in one moment. Just give us a second, please.
I want to also mention that we have an upcoming IRC meeting this Thursday at 2 p.m. So the agenda is posted on our website as well, and you'll see that there if you navigate there. And we will be talking a lot about, as far as, there's some interesting agenda items that you should watch out for. And we are going to be talking about our demographer. So this is the perfect timing if you want to get involved.
That's a very good point. And the every action of the commission is totally public, and it's all available on our website. Everything's recorded. You can play back the video or the audio and hear what we've said. We've been meeting now for about 6 months, and it's all there on the website, and will continue to be there as we move forward in this process. So the slide on the screen right now is the email and the telephone and the website. It's a big website, but we're doing a lot of things, and there's a lot to read. So I hope this answers that question. I see we have 2 minutes to go. Maybe in just a minute apiece, can each of the commissioners tell me why they wanted to be a commissioner and why you're really here? Commissioner Diaz?
I will defer to Commissioner Hansen.
Okay.
Thanks. I'm a retired teacher, and I taught U.S. history and government for many, many years. And I loved the subject, and I loved sharing the ideas with my students. Mostly they were seniors in high school. But the word that came up that was always so interesting to my students was gerrymandering. What does that mean? They would say, and what, that's a funny word. And in every history book, there was a picture of that district that looked like the salamander, and everybody remembered that word. And now I'm retired and I have time to volunteer, and I always, all my life, have volunteered to do something, but this seemed like it was right up my alley. I majored in political science in college, and I'd worked in District 4 in a lot of different agencies that work with at-risk youth, at-risk families. And so I was just interested in the place and the people and the process, and also committed to the fact that it shouldn't be decided to protect the politicians. These decisions should not be decided for that. It should be decided to protect the people and encourage the people to take responsibility to participate. So that's what we're doing.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Hansen. I see it's an hour past our start, and we are just about through. Again, I want to thank the people, all of you out there in Zoom land, for attending and being with us. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Larson, I think there's one last question. I don't know if we answered it yet, from Mary Thompson.
I see it. Says,
Yeah.
Is
It
it
came
fair
in at the last minute.
Yeah, it says, is it fair to say the community of interest input would decide a boundary between a city and a county boundary? I think now we're talking about voting districts. The city boundaries are set by law, and the city is within the county. So there is no county boundary in that sense. But I think you're talking about the voting boundaries, and they can be split between a city and a county, as they are in District 4 and the other districts. I hope that answers the question. But the community of interest input certainly affects the voting boundaries. Yes, we're going to take that into account. But the political boundary that exists between the city and the county outside the city is fixed by law. We don't have.
Or maybe she means that what if you have a community of interest that crosses city boundaries from one city to the next? Well, those efforts to keep cities together are not absolute. Those are where, as possible. So there could be a situation where it was more important to keep the community of interest together than to keep one city line intact. I could definitely see that happening.
Well, I think that really shows one of the challenges that we commissioners are going to have to face, because that's a very realistic situation. And we're looking forward to, I think, trying to determine that. Let's see, are there more questions now? It says the number of districts, 7, don't change. Well, actually, there are only 5 districts. And this goes back to the start of California back in 1850, when there were 4 counties, and each county was set up with 5 districts and 5 commissioners. And in the interim period, many other counties have been formed. The smaller counties have at-large seats. The larger counties have districts. So it's not going to change. That's set in our Constitution. There are only 5 districts in a county.
But the Constitution could be amended if that were an issue.
Oh, yes, and we do amend the Constitution every time we have an election, and we have initiatives which impact the Constitution. So yes, it can be changed, but right now, that's what it is. I don't see any other questions. And Barbara, is this terminated?
Yes, we can go ahead and end. And just to add on to your last comment, you're absolutely correct. The number of districts are set in the county charter, and that is 5. So absolutely correct. And yes, we are set to go, and you can all just say goodbye, and we're happy to end the Zoom call.
Thank you.
Bye-bye and thank you.
Bye. Thank you.